Hey guys. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Chasing Easy. This is Teresa Leet here, your hostess. And, Chasing Easy is about making life decisions where sometimes they're hard, but we usually will chase the easy way so we can stay away from the hard choices. We have a guest with us today, and his name is JR. He is the husband of the former episodes, part 1 and 2, Jesse's story. Jessie is his wife. And so her 2 episodes, if you have not listened to those, then I encourage you to go back to May and June, listen to those. And now this episode dropping is JR, and he's going to follow up with what Jessie had shared. So this is the man, the myth, and the mystery being revealed in this episode. And just as a reminder, everybody, just hashtag Chasing Easy, like and subscribe to the podcast. There are 5 different viewing channels that you can see it on, and share it with people that need some hope and inspiration. That's our goal here. So JR, all of that intro, I want to say thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. And Jessie called you out. She said, you got to have JR on here. And I said, you're daggone right. And so I'm glad that you're here and that you learned how to obey your wife.
Yes, exactly.
I'm kidding, of course. So what I would like to start with is Jessie had shared that you had been praying for a wife pretty specifically. And she had also shared, I guess, the actual prayer. She sent me a PDF of it. And that is in the show notes. If the audience wants to go back and look at that, that's in the show notes of I believe it's the June issue. Take us from there. Why were you praying for a wife, and what happened to lead up to you praying for a wife?
So just to kind of give you a little bit of context of my story. So I was married for from the time I was 18 to the time I was 30. And Jess and I started talking, I guess, when I was 35. So there was a 5-year gap between my divorce and us starting to date. Actually, 34. So about 4 years officially, but it was like right at the tail end of 2014. And so for me to go from a relationship that I started at 18 to 30 and go right into full on dating, I knew that I would get married again at some point, but I didn't want to date, seriously date for a while. So I put some time, some really serious time between. But even in those 4 years, what I started to realize is that we all have we all have a list of things that we're kind of looking for in a person, in a spouse, in a mate. It's even more so if you've already been through a divorce, because the list changes. It's different than when you first start dating someone when you're young. You don't have any life experience, and you don't really know all the things that you're looking for. And then when you add kids into the mix, there's that dynamic that you're having to think about. Is this person going to be right for my kids and all of that? So for me, what I realized was I had a list, but I never really considered that the other person looking to date me also has their own list, and was I going to measure up to that list? And not to the point where I'm not talking about money and all the things. I'm just talking about the really the deep emotional things that we like
values, right?
Yes, right, exactly.
Morals, values, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because inside of a relationship, we can grow and build and all the things. But if you don't have someone that has the same core values that you have, that doesn't, they don't parent the same way. They don't love God. If that's, what that, like for me, that was a deal breaker for me. And so I learned that probably in the midst of that 4.5 year time frame, that, man, I've been only thinking about myself, and so I started asking God for very specific things, to really hone in on things that I needed to change, things that I did in my past marriage that would have maybe saved it. Because I probably should also say that I wasn't the one that wanted the divorce in the first marriage, and so there was a lot of emotional, I stayed emotionally connected for quite a while in that relationship because I didn't want it, and obviously that wasn't healthy either. So I also learned that in that time frame. So I think a lot of people would probably leave one relationship and maybe, you know, a year down the road, hop into another one, but never realize that they were still emotionally connected or still emotionally available to the person that that they're not no longer with. Whether that's good emotions or bad emotions, it can still keep you tied. You know, in my case, I
Yeah.
was just always available. You know, like I would just drop everything to be available because I wanted to connect again.
Well, and JR, what you're referring to is called soul ties.
Yeah.
So, you know, you give yourself away to somebody emotionally, physically, whatever that looks like. And there is a soul tie there that unless you deal with that and address it, it stays with you and it impacts future relationships.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you just a couple of questions because you had mentioned, you know, we started out with the list because you were praying for a wife and you had a very specific list.
Yeah.
But your first wife, you mentioned a couple of things. One is, and that was before we started to air, that you knew her since you were 13.
Yeah.
And then at 18, you got married. Did you have a list when you got married then?
No, when I was, well, because we were together for so long, we grew up together. I mean, you know, like and I think that's pretty normal, at least in my experience, it was normal you just kind of progressively go through this and never expecting at 13 that this thing is going to last for this long. Now, there were a few, we broke up 6 months into that relationship, you know, and then got back together and then broke up right as she was graduating high school because she was 3 years older, and for a couple months, and then we got back together, and you know, that was pretty much the end of it. But yeah, I mean, now I don't think that I had that list, but I didn't realize getting into a relationship that young that you have to start building lists of things that you want to do and accomplish together, how you're gonna stage your growth together, and at 18, nobody tells you that stuff. I mean, you're not you know, kind of given this guide that says, hey, you really need to talk things through and figure out, okay, what do I want to do in the next 2 years? What do I want to do in the next 5 years? How am I going to, and you'll hear me use this term a lot, how am I going to protect my wife's heart? That was something that I learned in that first marriage that I didn't do, and I didn't. There were things in the marriage that you know, allowed her to feel, you know, like, I don't know what the word is exactly, like vulnerable. Her dad left when she was really young. This is my first wife I'm talking about. Her dad left before she was born, and so there was always that detached, you know, feeling there. And so like she always felt like, you know, she wasn't wanted and all that, right? So for me, she always thought that I was going to leave her. That was from the beginning. You're going to leave me, and that's
that's the fear of abandonment, by the way, which many women suffer with and struggle with and don't give it that name, but that's what that is.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, it's me constantly saying, you know, that in my heart, I had no intentions of ever leaving. Even when things got hard, I was willing to work things out, and that stuff happened. But I think where I went wrong though is I think as men, we're not told that there's things that we need to do to foster security in our wife, and not financially and all those things. Those are important, but not in this context. There's things that we need to be able to say to them. We need to be able to speak certain things to who they are and their value, because so many women don't feel value. They find their value in so many other things. You know, men have treated them in a way for so long that they feel like their physical value is their only value, where that's so not true, right? And
JR, I gotta, what you just shared right there is giving me chills, because the women that are listening to this podcast right now, our audience, a lot of them are probably feeling devalued or feeling that the only value they have is in their physical appearance. Yeah. And when you say that they're looking for other things, yes, women do a lot, but I have found men that do too. And any time that we're looking for our identity in people, positions, or possessions, any of those, when we're looking for our identity through those things, it is always going to fail. So
Yeah.
what you just hit on is really powerful. We are more than what you see.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
we're
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
much more than that.
Yeah. And I think, we end up trading off, parts of ourselves in that exchange. I mean, if we're, a lot of people will get into relationships and they will, because that's where they feel their value is, they'll just trade that piece of themselves, and then they get hurt, right? And so then they keep walling off the most important parts, the really intimate parts. They wall those things off. And so for me, in my first marriage, I realized, after that ended, that I had not protected my wife's heart, my ex-wife's heart. And so when I knew going into my next relationship or my next marriage, that was going to be something that was so key. So
Speak to me a minute about that. So
yeah,
when you say, protecting her heart,
yeah.
what does that look like? What does that mean?
So, okay, so I'll give you kind of a visual thought process. I had a conversation one time with my daughter and a boyfriend that she was dating, and they were getting into like disagreements and arguments, and there was tears, and there were words, like he was using his size to kind of like, she felt kind of threatened a little bit by his size and things in these conversations. So I sat
Did you
down with
have
her.
your gun next to you?
Right? Yeah. And I sat down with him and I said, I asked him, I said, if you guys were out somewhere and someone said something to her that was inappropriate, that somebody tried to touch her, grab her, say something to her that was just, off the wall and was completely inappropriate, would you fight to defend her honor? Would you, just go all in, right? Physically attack somebody because they were doing that. And of course, yeah, absolutely. Right. And, to do anything to make sure that she is protected and loved and cared for. And I said, well, why is it that she leaves your presence feeling the way that you're describing? You would fight for her honor, but yet your words, the things that you say to her, are actually cutting her deeper than some stranger that might say something out somewhere else. And so those are the kind of things that I think about when I want to protect my wife's heart. I want to build up. I know all of my wife's insecurities. I know Jess's insecurities. I can speak to those things like no one else can, because she sees them as insecurities, but there may be things that she can't see, right? And she does the same thing for me. Like you said, she talked me up. Well, there's a lot of those things that she talks about that I would never even think of as anything, and then she speaks into me, and I mean, those things, when I leave home, having her say those things over me and building me up, that protects my heart. So when I'm out in the work, out at work, I'm out in stores and things like that, the temptations that are out in life, those things, we're protecting our spouses by really honing in on and saying the things that need to be said, because there's so many people out there in infidelity and just they're missing something in their own relationship, so they figure I can find it out in another one, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it turns into just more trading of that same, of those same physical traits that we're talking about before, and all we really needed to do is to really protect, each other's heart.
Oh, that's so well said. And it reminds me of the book study, or the Bible study. I guess it is a book study, Love and Respect. And so the elders talk about, the man mostly wants to feel respected and the woman mostly wants to feel loved. And what you're talking about here is something that's internal that we don't necessarily see on the outside, although it manifests in the way we carry ourselves, in the way that we love on other people, and the way we feel about ourselves inside. So that is just like core to having an incredible relationship, even through the difficult times, because we all have them. We can love our spouses dearly, but there are things that can trigger certain things. And so it's not always 100% all smiles.
Right. No, you're absolutely
But the
right.
more that you realize and understand that your spouse is not the enemy, that they're there and they love you and protect you and cherish you and honor you, it's a lot easier to get through those unscathed.
Yeah.
So that's just so powerful. And I love how you said to your daughter, how old is your daughter?
22.
22. When you were talking to her boyfriend about, protecting her, loving her, and caring for her, that your words are a whole lot more powerful than your actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody in the audience needs to hear that. So if the guy is saying that he loves you, but his actions aren't lining up with what he's saying, ladies, you need to really take a strong look at that. All right. So sorry, I wanted to really hit on that. And then a question for you too. And I think what you were referring to, you jump from one relationship to the next, which a lot of us do because we're getting our love and our identity and our feeling of self-worth from other people. That's rebounding.
Yeah.
But something that you did is you took some time off. What did you discover in those couple of years where you came out of a divorce that you did not want, that you said, took off those couple of years? What did you discover about yourself, and how did that inform what you would do with your next wife, because you knew you would get married again?
Well, I guess that's probably a big one, a big question. Well, I guess I knew there were okay. Here's the easiest way to answer that, I think, because one of the things that we told my ex-wife and I told our kids as a result, we said we both took our eyes off of God at different times and stopped, really seeking what was right, and became very selfish in our actions. And of course, there was a lot of details that we didn't discuss with them, but that was true. I mean, that was absolutely true. So I knew going into my next relationship, the one that I was going to be in, forever, that God was going to absolutely have to be at the center of it, and so intentionally that it was a deal breaker if that wasn't the case. But that's not always easy to find. When you're looking, you could look at so many different places, and people will say that they're a Christian, or that they follow Jesus, and then you get into a relationship with them, and you realize quickly that they may just be saying that so that they can answer the questions on on the online dating site that they're a Christian, or that might just be a word that they put in as a search, because people are searching for Christian man or Christian woman. And it turns out that there's no relationship. And, we couldn't Jess and I couldn't do this life. We can't separate our life from that conversation. Like, God and our life is so intertwined that if you try to separate him, it just doesn't, it wouldn't make sense. We wouldn't be able to explain our life without him.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. It's all where your focus is, right? And you mentioned being, you became selfish when you were talking about your ex, but something that I have even learned is that you can't be selfish and happy at the same time.
No,
you really can't. Yeah. You think you are. Yeah. That's just like seeking the next high almost. It's if you're doing it for yourself, it will eventually fail.
Yeah.
It just, or you're going to continue to want more and more, and then you're never satisfied.
Right.
So,
yeah.
All right. So now you're beyond this. Let's say you're 2 years into this, new discovery of who JR is and who JR wants as his wife. And so now let's fast forward to where you met Jesse and how that relationship unfolded. And then we'll end the season or the podcast on where you are today, because I think it's a beautiful story.
Sure. So Jess and I actually met at a previous church when we were both married. So we were both in the same church, and she may have alluded to this, I don't know on hers, but so I was married to my ex-wife. She was married to her husband, her ex-husband, and we were both on the same drama team. So there was a church drama team, and we would do skits and plays and whatnot. So I knew of her in that context, but again, remember, we're in marriages, and we're not hanging out, because so there wasn't really any depth to that. Just how you would know someone if you got together once a week and did drama practice or whatever.
She was an acquaintance.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Nothing more.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's funny because later on, I'll kind of come back to that because I didn't realize how much I didn't know about her. So anyway, but all I knew about her, and I also went to church with her sister and brother-in-law. And so I knew them really well. And so all I really knew about her is just her personality. She was always so excited, so loving to people, and her kid and her son at the time, all of those things. And she was just always happy. It just always seemed just joy just coming from her, right? So that's all I really knew. So I was 2013 was I had just, there was a Facebook post that came up on our Facebook. Now we lived in two separate areas. I lived in Delaware. She lived, pretty far out in Cecil County. So there was about a 30 or 40 minute difference in, and our circles never intersected. Once we both left that church, we didn't see each other. We didn't have any, direct contact at all. And so anyway, and she was still in her marriage. So this 2013, this Facebook post popped up, and it sounded like, something wasn't, like she was single. I don't know what it was that she posted, but it just, and this thought came into my mind, like, oh, she would be somebody I'd be interested in, that was just the thought. Right. And she wasn't even sending it. It was just in the feed. And then, 2 weeks went by, something else popped in the feed, and it was clear that she was still in marriage, whatever. So I moved on, whatever. I ended up in a relationship for a year and a half after that. So 2000, at the end of 2014, I had gotten out of that relationship, which I kind of mentioned this before the podcast. There are sometimes you're going to go into relationships in between the one you find that will be exactly what you need them to be at the time. So that relationship that I had right before Jess was the one that really helped me put boundaries in place and helped me break that emotional connection that I have with my ex-wife for because I had been together with her for so long, and I didn't know how to put boundaries in place. And so there was a relationship in between my ex-wife and Jess that allowed that to happen. And she just wasn't the right person for me. But it actually had a purpose for both of us. We got to learn and grow from it.
Sure.
So anyway, end of 2014, I see another post pop up from Jess in the feed. Again, not directed to me, not but her last name was changed, and I thought, that's interesting.
So you weren't stalking her, right?
No,
let's be clear. Okay, all right.
Just the luck of the draw, just luck, right? So
yeah,
I see your last name change, so I sent her a Facebook message like, hey, I see your last name change. What's going on? Just kind of reconnect. And what I didn't know is that the night that I sent that message, and she may have alluded this too in her podcast, but that night her ex-husband was being arrested. And so, so I sent her a message, and the only reason that she responded to it is because that was happening, and there was like some chaos going on in her life at that moment. And she never mentioned it. It was her birthday, and she was with some friends, and so she answered the message, and we started chatting back and forth. And I don't know any of this is going on in the background, so I have no idea what's going on in her world right now. And so I'm just trying to send messages to a girl that I would like to, a woman that I would like to date or to hang out with or whatever, right? But I couldn't figure out. She was being, it's really always hard to get connected. We would talk and text and all that. And then December came around, and she started being a little bit more, we'd talk more. By the end of December, we were talking every day, hours, we would spend on the phone, and we hung out.
And at this point, did you know anything about her past at this point when you were talking all that time? Was it disclosed, or?
I didn't know the depths of it at that point. I mean, I knew him brief, I just always thought that they were oddly matched. When I knew them, I was always like, she's really happy. He never looks happy at all. That's really all I knew. But she kept so much of that relationship, hidden, that nobody really knew the truth. And it probably took a year into our own marriage to find out some of the depths of what it was going on. But we ended up really talking all the time in January, and we were going to go out on our first official date that wasn't like at her house on the back deck. We were going to go out for Valentine's Day, 2015. And I mean,
Okay,
I was
wait
like
a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I think she said something about the deck. Were you weren't allowed in her house or something? Were you always like just hanging out on the deck? Tell me what that was.
Yeah, so we call it deck dating because she had her son and he was home, and because of all of the stuff that had gone on in that previous relationship, he was afraid to leave the house. She didn't feel comfortable like leaving him with somebody else because he was feeling very vulnerable and stuff.
Sure.
But and she didn't do this with anybody else, but because he knew me from before, she just passed me off as one of the girls. That's what she would tell
okay.
It's just JR. He's just one of the girls. It's fine, whatever, right? And so so that kind of made it okay for me to be at the house, but not really be, And so we would hang out on the back deck and we would talk for hours and hours, look at the stars and all this stuff. But the thing was that like it was so comfortable. The conversations were so comfortable and so easy that, man, I felt like head over. I knew in just a 2 months, I was like, yeah, this is what I want. Right?
Like goosebumps.
Yeah. And, so I was like, so, into it. And then come to the end of that month, and she started getting scared because of all the things that were happening in her world. And by this point, I understood that there was some, all this legal stuff was going to happen and what he was capable of and all that stuff. But he was still in jail. And so she stopped talking. She stopped responding to text. Completely just stopped. And so I had a friend of mine that I would like run things by. Right. Well, I sat down one night and I wrote a poem, and this was just before Valentine's Day. We were supposed to go out, and I wrote a poem. And it was about her, but it didn't specify anything specifically about her name or anything like that. So I just titled it "To My Future Wife, from Your Future Husband," and it was all of the things that I was feeling at the time. And so anyway, I sent her a copy of it. She thought I was nuts, because now it feels like well, this guy's just nuts, right? And it did feel a little nuts because I knew that this is.
She wasn't talking to you, right?
She wasn't talking to me, right?
Like cold turkey, shut you down, and here you are sending her this.
Yeah. So I realized early on she wasn't going to respond to text messages anymore. Like I realized that. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna bombard her with things. I'm just going to, So I posted that on Facebook and I sent her a copy of it, and then I just started, I started praying. I told God, I said, you know what? The good news is I don't have to look anymore because I know who I want to be with. I don't have to look anymore. So there's no need to date or anything like that. So I'm just going to spend some time now, focusing on some other things. So I did all sorts of stuff. I started working out because I had all kinds of time now. I don't have to do all the stuff I was doing. Right. And it's still, to this day, it still seems crazy. But all that time I'm praying, I'm telling, talking to God about it. And it was hard because she wasn't responding. I'm having a one-sided, every once in a while I'd send a message out to her and say, I'm praying for you and Donovan. I'm and there were certain dates. I knew she had court cases and stuff and things were coming up. And so I would always make sure I hit those dates and make sure she knew that I was thinking about her on those times. And, anything I could do to really just, it was so much about her. It wasn't about me. Right. And, but again, I knew what I wanted. And so, at the end of like April, May, she responded to a couple things around some of the court cases, but nothing major. After one of the court cases, she did invite me over because she just was so overwhelmed by it. And so we talked a few times that way. But it really went on like that for, through May. And then I think actually in May, she decided that she was ready. She said she was ready to date. And at that point I was like, you know what? I don't think you're quite ready yet. I said, I think
okay, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
So right. Here you are, right? Yeah. You're pursuing her. You know that she is who you want.
Right.
she's finally turned around about face and says, okay, I'm ready. And now you're saying, nope, you're not really quite ready yet.
Yeah.
That takes tremendous restraint, number one, and incredible wisdom and discernment.
Yeah. I mean, it was,
that's huge.
I can't take credit for any of this stuff. Like literally, I knew what I wanted, but I didn't want it in the wrong way. And I didn't want to rush it. I didn't want to rush her because I knew how much stuff she had going on. And the whole time, I mean, she was like, everything that was going on in her life, she's like, I'm just going to ruin you. Like, you don't understand the depths of what I'm dealing with here. And so, you know, and you can't foresee all of it. I mean, I will say that you can't foresee all of the things you can't, but I, you know, so at the end of, the whole summer, I think I really upset her at that point when I told her no. And so for the whole summer, we didn't talk at all. And then in August, either I posted something or she posted something. I think she posted something and I commented on it, and it kind of opened the dialogue back up a little bit. And so, you know, we ended up hanging out a couple of times and, you know, getting together. And again, it was always just so easy. At the end of that summer, I actually had invited her to go with me to the beach with the kids. And I said, you know, I'm gonna take the kids to the beach. I would like to take Donovan with me, and we're gonna go down. And she was gonna go. She agreed to it. And but then at the last minute, she ended up having to work. And she was like, but you know, Donovan still wants to go. And you know, which if I wish you guys could know him. That was a God thing, because there was like him going with anybody was anywhere was really, really right. So the fact that he actually went with me was just odd, you know, based on everything that he had been through. And so we went that day, and I had a photographer on the beach. There were photographers that take pictures of you while you're doing stuff, right? And they'll come around, and I'm like, you know what? Take pictures. And then at the end, I just bought all of them, right? Not knowing what was in them, right? So all the kids are playing on the, you know, trying to get up on these surfboards, you know, and man, there was one picture where I was out in the water. Donovan had just got up for the first time and stood up on the surfboard, and the way that the photographer just snapped a picture, and in the background you see him standing on the board for the first time, you know, and I'm in the background, and I'm just like so excited in the background. And then when I didn't know what that picture was, right, but I sent those to her, and she said, you know, later on she told me, she said, when I saw the picture of you being excited for my son that way, she said, I knew. She said, I knew. There was no, you know, like, you know, to be able to, yeah. So she's like, I've never seen that kind of joy in somebody's face, for, you know, and so, you know, just little moments like that.
Sure. God winks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so she, and I didn't know this too, like there was a lot of little moments in our story that felt kind of like soap opera moments. But like, I had posted a picture of me getting into a relationship with that girl I mentioned before, right? Her name was Megan. I posted a picture of it on Facebook, right? This was right around the time that I thought Jess was single, and it turned out she wasn't, right? Well, things were ending at that point for her and her husband, and so she had taken a screen grab of that picture that I posted and sent it to a friend and was like, "Can you believe this? This guy's been single for 3 years." And I would have never known that, right? But it turned out it was totally true. Like that actually happened, and so she still had the picture saved on one of her old phones. Just little weird stuff like that had happened, and you know, it was just, you know, God just knew
that was being orchestrated all in the background before either one of you even knew what was going to come to be. That's what's so cool about who we serve, our Creator.
It was. And so, you know, but we started talking, like, you know, seriously talking August. It wasn't long. I mean, we got married the following April. So I proposed in November of 2015, and we got married in April. And you know, again, and getting into a relationship when God's at the center of it, you know, and the growth. I mean, the growth that I've seen in her world since then is just unbelievable, and the stories that she's been able to share with people. You know, when you allow God to take your all the hurt and pain and heal it first, you find freedom from those things, and then you can share that with people. Oh my gosh, I'm just blown away by her now.
But see, it takes, we all have to have somebody who's edifying us, somebody who is speaking life into us. Like you said, praying over us, and the two of you praying together. It is a combination that results in the beauty that you're seeing in her now. Because for so long, a lot of us, women and men alike, have been beaten down. And even though we look like we're put together on the outside, we're still wearing a mask. Our inside does not match our outside. And you have to have people that, number one, are aligned with your mentioned it earlier, your core values. Do they have the same morals and ethics that you have and believe in? And of course, Christ is at the center of that. And if you don't have those, or if you start negotiating on those things that you believe in, you're going to end up in a really bad spot. Yeah. And that's what most of us do, because we want to be loved and accepted so badly that we will settle for bad love.
Yeah, no,
and that's what many of us do.
Yeah.
But your story is just so inspiring. And I'm going to ask you to end on this, because I know that you are just madly in love with your wife, that you had extreme patience, that you exhausted everything and were still selfless to be able to love on Jessie in a way that she has never experienced, which is also part of her healing. That's what the Lord does. He brings the people into our lives that we need to help us to see that.
Right.
But I would love for you to end on a note where you're going to share something about either what a godly man looks like, or for the women who are listening to this podcast that have been hurt or dissed, or whatever you want to call it, by men. What is something that you would share with them to say, look for this, and then you'll know that you're going to be with a good man? Is there something that we can look for?
I think there could be. I mean, I think you really have to see. Okay, I'll give you one thought and this actually came from a friend of mine, and she kind of pointed it out to me later on. But she said, she was doing a lot of dating after her first marriage split up, and she said you can always tell. You can always tell how a guy is going to treat you later on by the way that he communicates about his ex. So really, if he's willing to share all of the horrible things, right, about his ex, and he doesn't take any responsibility at all, it's all her and all the things, that's exactly how he's going to speak to you, or speak about you at some point. And because it's never just one-sided. I mean, there's always things, even in the worst scenarios, there's always things that, that we share some of the, of the, whatever the word is, I can't think of it, but
well, the responsibility of whatever happened in the relationship, it is shared. I mean, it's two-sided. And I know it's cliche, but there's your side, there's her side, and then there's the truth in the middle. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just really looking at how they communicate with other people. When you watch them from across the room, is this a person that you're going to want to spend the rest of your life with? Because it's not just what he's going to say to you, right? Because a lot of guys, and I'm sure women at the same time, face to face,
angels.
Yeah, we will say all of the things, right? But if it can't be duplicated in any other relationship that they have, then it's probably not true. The other thing I will say is that you should believe what he tells you about himself. So if he tells you he's a jerk, believe him, right? I mean,
there you go. But so many women want that bad boy image, right? I mean, I was one. I wanted the bad boy image. And you get the bad boy image, you're going to get the bad boy attitude and treatment. So
yeah, exactly right. I think the other thing too is that, I think a lot of people will, and I hear this, like in work scenarios, and some of the young ladies that have worked with me in offices and stuff, they compare their relationships. So they'll get out of a bad relationship, and then they'll compare the next guy to that one, right? That's not it, right? So if we're
it's not fair either.
it's not fair, right? But if we're using our worst relationship to compare the next person to, all he's got to do is just not do the worst thing that the last guy did, right? So, a nice guy is just the price of admission. He needs to be nice, just period, right? There's so much more than that, right? You don't just look for a nice guy. You've got to have a guy that's going to have some depth to his life. He's got some values and some, really, I mean, like I said, in my life, I would not accept anyone that was not willing to really be sold out for God, to be reliant
All in.
all in, exactly. Because if I take God out of my life, then I'm just a self-centered, self-absorbed person, selfish, and all of those things. So if I'm constantly trying to lay my own desires down for His will says that I should love my wife so much that I would lay down my life for her, right? And so if that's the mold that I'm trying to work towards, then she's assured that I'm going to have her best interest in mind. So yeah, I would say, they definitely have to exhibit some of that. But really, I think, how they treat their family is another really, big thing. Family dynamics are a big part of that was part of some of my decisioning too, is like, what do the family dynamics look like? The person could really come out of a situation that is going, you can kind of foresee what's potentially down the road for you, based on their family dynamics. So you have to be careful of that too. Know what you're getting into.
Be careful with it, but don't let that be the only barometer, because
Correct.
obviously there are people who have come out of horrific dysfunctional backgrounds and family settings that are thriving, and that's coming out of that dysfunction is what pushed them to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that is the person who stays stuck in that is the one that does not thrive, and they use it as an excuse to be the way that they are. So, but listen, we're going to wrap this up. You have given us some great insight, some wonderful wisdom to share, and I hope that the audience really sits down and takes notes. I do want to post the poem that you wrote again, with your permission, for the show notes on your episode.
Absolutely.
Because I really think that that's what we're missing as women, but I also think that the men have an incredible message in this.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be the men that they're meant to be.
Yeah.
And most men don't have a mentor to do that. So I pray that all the men out there can get some mentorship. Drop the pride, drop the ego, and just sit still for a little while and really discover who you are.
Yeah, and can I just say one more thing? Something that I realized one night, Jess was, it started snowing, and she woke up just briefly in the middle of the night. It's like 3:30 in the morning. And I woke up because I heard her, but she's sitting on the floor next to our bed, looking out the window at the snow. And she said to me, I was like tired, and so I went over to another room for a second, came back, got a glass of water or whatever. She's like, hey, come sit with me for a second. And, most men and most guys in a lot of contexts, they would just say, I'm tired or whatever. They just kind of blow this off. And I will just say this: when your wife has, I sat on the floor with her for about 15, 20 minutes, and I just watched her look at the snow, and I watched her just like, I was able to see the world the way she sees it in that moment. And man, I'm telling you, it made such a difference in my heart. One, I got to see her worship her God, right, in that moment, and like look at the intricacies of all the snowflakes hitting the window. And if I had blown that off, I would have missed such a blessing, but I would have also hurt her in that moment. She would have just felt blown off again, right? And so I would just encourage guys to really take the time to really, really look into just allow your wife to be herself, and you're going to learn so much about her world. Allow her to invite you into her world. She asks you to stop and look at the flowers. I'm telling you, I love flowers now. I love how intricate they are and how much God has put into every little flower, man. it takes some of the stresses away from life when you can really slow down. And my wife has helped me so much in that way just by doing that. So that would be another area to
That's beautiful. And that's a whole nother level of intimacy. I mean,
Mm.
that's true connection. My eyes might have been leaking a little bit right there. All right. Well, JR, thank you again so much for participating,
Absolutely.
for sharing your heart in this. God bless you and Jesse and your marriage and the way that you are witnessing to your children and to other couples that are bystanders watching your love story unfold. I thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.